for. I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my dream till I met you. Oh, I was breathing and not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my tomb till I met you. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul. Now your freedom is all that I know. The old made new. Jesus, when I met you, when you called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. Needed rescue, my sin was heavy. The chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan. Now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open. And when you call my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You call my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. Whew. Amen.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Finally, we're back. I apologize for not being here for a while, but I'm always praying with you guys, even though I'm not here. Today we got my right hand is with me, Aaron, and Kimberly is in the house. She's here somewhere, and we got special guest with Liliana in the house. So, but today I want to talk to you about let's see, don't stop on three. Now that's gonna make a lot of sense in a few minutes, but don't stop on three. We're gonna come from the Second Kings 13 and 14 chapter, 13th chapter, 14th verse, and this story is basically about the last commandment of Elijah. Elijah was a prophet of Israel. And so what it, in chapter 13 verse 14, Elijah was on his deathbed, and the king Joash came and to weep over him, and he was came to show his respects for Elijah. And so when he came, Elijah told him, he says, to get a bow and arrow, and then take that bow and go point it at the east window, and I want you to fire some arrows out. So that was what he told the king to do, and he told him that each bow represent God's deliverance over Samaria. No, how am I saying that? I'm not saying that right. Samaria. So this is the assignment, and so when he had him to take the bow, and then as he grabbed the bow, in this position, Elijah put his hands on the king's hands, and they fired a bow out the window. Now, the commandment was he gave him a whole sliver of arrows, and he says, fire them out the window, fire them into the floor. So the king, after Elijah said that, he told him that each arrow would be delivering them from, because say it again. Samaria was their arch enemy, and they were always harassing Israel. And so, if the bow represented deliverance, the king fires the arrows out this window, and it was a sign that God would deliver them from Samaria. Now, what the king did is then he took the bow, and Elijah told him, said, now strike the ground 3 times, or take the bow and strike the ground. So the king struck the ground 3 times and stopped. Now, when he stopped, Elijah was very upset and rebuked him, because he told him, he says, look, I gave you a whole sliver of arrows. Now I'm paraphrasing this chapter. I gave you a whole sliver, but you only fired 3 times. He said you should have shot 4, 5, 6 times, because that way you would have a total victory over Samaria. And what he wind up doing, he says, now you're going to be victorious only 3 times over them. So that was very significant. And that is why we got the title, Don't Stop at 3. Because the king, he stopped after firing 3 arrows. And that's this story, the reason I wanted to bring this story out, because it really points, it leads to the covering of all of our lives, as a parent, as a husband and wife, as a single person. This story covers the totality of man, and I'll explain that more. So Elijah got up very upset with the king, and he rebuked him, and he told him, you could have had total victory over Samaria. And basically, to give you a little background on Elijah, Elijah was the prophet of Israel for 60 years, and he had served over 4 kings. Now, Samaria hated Elijah because every strategy they had to attack Israel, God would download that strategy to Elijah. Elijah would run to the king and tell him, hey, this is what they're going to do. They're coming, they're going to attack you from the west. They got this amount of men. And so Israel were able to put up a defense. So in Samaria, Elijah was public enemy number one. They wanted to get rid of him because he was flanking everything that they attempted. Now, with the King Joseph, it seems like, well, this guy is honoring his prophet, but he wasn't the best king. He for 15 years he brought about adultery, and he was very wicked. And really, the only reason he was there for Elijah is because he knew this was his safety net. And even he said that Elijah was more powerful than all of the chariots, than all of the men in his army, because God downloaded strategies to him. And so that's what he really was, he's like, man, what am I going to do? He was at kind of like a panic because Elijah is leaving. And now what am I going to do? He was worried more about his kingdom than about Elijah. So in one of the questions that you may have is, has God ever promised you something and you went haphazardly after it? Because that's basically, he told the king, he says, hey, he gave him, a sliver of arrows. It's probably, what, 15, 20 arrows in there? He gave him all. He said, just fire them out this window. That's all you got to do. And when he told him, Joash followed the directions, but he didn't apply himself. He just shot 3 times. Okay, I did it 3 times. He did what you said, but if he would have just fired 6, 7, 8, 10 of them, then he wouldn't have to worry about his kingdom, because the arrows represented deliverance from this country. And and so when we look at that at our lives, sometimes God gives us a plan of deliverance for us, and we kind of haphazardly apply it, and when I said this story represents the whole man, think about it. I want to talk now to the husbands, but wives, pay close attention to this, because what I say to the men, reverse it and you flip it for yourselves, for the wives. But in a marriage, when a husband takes on a wife, in the beginning stages, and I remember this with my wife, you on your best behavior, man. You every time she comes to the door, you open the door, you give her flowers for no reason, you winning her over. You doing whatever it takes to win her over. And then once you get her, after you've been married a while, you have a tendency to take that relationship for granted. And that's called stopping at 3. We can't stop at 3 with our marriage. We have to every single day honor our wives, and wives, honor your husband. Treat them like you did in the very beginning when you were trying to win them over. And that should be an ongoing process. Don't stop at 3. And it's the same thing when you talk about parenting. Oh man, this really messed me up, because in parenting, a lot of parents today, they want to be their kids' BFF, best friends forever, instead of being their parent. And they don't want to have that hard conversation with their children. But the reality is, if you don't parent your child, if you don't have that hard conversation, then what is it, Instagram, Facebook, the media will do it for you. And you may not like the way they introduce things to your children. I know one of the things when I was raising my kids, Kimberly, I I didn't want us to live in a we at one point we were staying in a kind of rough area. So I moved us to a better area, middle class area. But to stay there, I had to work 3 jobs, but that was, I didn't want them growing up in a bad environment because I didn't want that environment to influence them. And so I'm thinking, I'm doing a great job. I'm working 3 jobs. But what I was failing to do is give them that quality time that they needed. Now, I've been blessed. I was listening to Aaron said that he watched me struggle and how I handled that, but I could have done a whole lot better. And as parents, one of the things we really should do is make a list of all of the things that we didn't get taught and teach them to our kids, so that we're not stopping at 3. We're going all the way because your kids are that valuable, and it's the same thing when you look at employment. If you're working for a company, you're working for somebody else, um, one of the things that you have to do is you have to work, especially a Christian, you have to give your very best. In Colossians, it says, whatever you do, do unto God and not unto man. And that means basically give 100% of yourself. So many times people get a job and they don't want to submit to the authority, or they get a job and they think after they've been working for a month that they should be the manager, and they haphazardly work. Well, that's not the way we should work. And I thought about this recently. My wife had been working at this plant, and she worked so hard, Kimberly. She would do sometime almost 2,000 parts, and I'm saying to myself, why are you working so hard? They're not reinforcing your effort, but every day she would work harder and harder. And it wasn't like God just rewarded her right away, but it was ironic because a young lady who barely knew her thought about her in a better position where she could work less hours and make more money. And it had to be just God promoting her because she represented what a true employee should represent for so many years. And, sometimes it's not right away, instantaneously. You just got to keep flowing and keep trusting God. And she did that. And now she's reaping the benefits. And it's not her dream job, but it's so many unlimited possibilities from where she was. And so when we're working for someone, let's work. One of the things my dad taught me, I never forget, he said, when you work for someone, you should work so hard that they are uncomfortable when it comes time to pay because they don't feel they're paying you enough for what you do. And I use that philosophy all my life when I worked, and it's always benefited me to work hard and then reap the benefits, And so when we working, we want to be able to don't not stop at 3. Don't just fire off 3 arrows. Keep firing them off. And one of the things, like as a Christian, sometimes we get saved and we do just enough to get by. And that's called stopping at 3. How many times will you go to church and you see your brother, your sister struggling, and you go and you're doing good? How many times do you take groceries to their house to help them out? Or if you see that they're in a need and you just sow into them to help them out, or even sometimes giving them money is not the solution because they might have a problem with money, but teaching them how to fish for themselves would be more beneficial. So as a Christian, we want to go all in and don't be told that line where you do just enough to stay saved. but go all the way in. Don't shoot as many arrows as you can. And then as a single person, it's the same applying application. A lot of single people, they want to get married. Well, ask God to lead you to the person. God will lead you to the right person, but sometimes the right person is not what you think is the right person. He might not, or she might not fit your desires, but that's the person God's leading you to, and that's the person you're going to be successful with. So we have to trust God in that area, and the last thing I want to talk about is that back in the Second Kings chapter 5, there was a general. I think his name was starts with an N. Let me see. It's in my notes. Naaman. He came to Elijah. He had leprosy, and he heard that Elijah was a great prophet and that he could heal him. So he came to Elijah's house. He was downstairs, and Elijah sent his servant down and said, tell him to go to the river Jordan and dip himself 7 times, and he'll be cured of his leprosy. Well, the king, the general was offended because he's like, wow, I came all this way and he won't even come and meet me in my face to my face. And he wanted him to just wave his hand, do something magical and heal him. Well, that's not the way it was. And so he was walking away. He was very upset. And his servant said, look, just follow what he said do. Just do what he said do, and let's see if that works. So he went to the river Jordan. He dipped himself in the river Jordan 7 times. And on the 7th time, he was completely cured of leprosy. But I was thinking about that. How many times do God tell us to dip 7 times and we stop at 4? Or we stop at 3? When you stop before the time God told you, you cut yourself short, and you don't receive the true blessing that God has for you. So if he says 7 times, dip yourself 7 times. And the last thing I want to say, and then we're going to go ahead and pray, is God, the choice of weapon that God used was an arrow. Now, what's significant about an arrow, and this kind of blew me away when we was going over this, is when you shoot a bow and arrow, you pull the string back, right? And you pull it back pretty far, and then you let it go. So it starts off going in the opposite direction, and then you let it go, and it seeks its target. Well, think about this. Sometimes you're going through a lot of stuff. And when you're going through, you're struggling. You talked about that earlier with tribulations. That's just the arrow being pulled back. Sometimes you just got to wait it out and let that arrow fling forward, because it's going to reach its destination. So we got to learn to trust God, and we cannot stop at 3. So that's my thing for today. Let's pray. Father God, I thank you so much for this day. It's good to be back. I thank you for Pastor Tom for giving me this opportunity. I ask that you bless him and Kimberly. It's a blessing to have Kimberly back with us. And bless them, Father. Even now, there's different situations that both of them are dealing with. I ask that you just point out to them that they're just being pulled back with the arrow, and it's going to release and be a positive for them. What they think is negative going to turn to a positive. So bless them, Father, and no worries, no stress. Give them witty strategies and how to teach and lead firmly rooted to the place that you would have us to go. Bless the people in firmly rooted, the family. Let them not stop at 3. Let them give 100% of themselves as far as being Christians, as far as being husbands, parents, and employees. Let them give 100% of themselves and helping each other out. Bless this church, Father. Bless the community because of the church. And we thank you right now. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, the glory forever. Amen. Now, my daughter is sending me to the Lions game on Sunday, but I'm cheering for the Bears. Go Bears!